Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad that I came after the entree. That's always important. Trust me, I've been there. Here's a quick story I wanted to tell you that I think in some way gets to the heart of it all. In classic Washington, D.C. fashion, I'm going to tell you about a really fascinating political discussion that I recently had with my cab driver. So I'm in this cab, and my driver, he's from maybe the Mideast somewhere, he peers back at me a couple of times. And I said, oh, I know what this is. You know, it doesn't happen that often. It happens once in a while, but it's nice when it does. I don't like to make a big deal of it, but, you know, sure enough, he turns to me and says, are you the man from the Fox News? And I said, well, I'd like to think I'm better known for radio. I used to fill in for Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, only person to ever fill in for Glenn, Rush, and Sean, but you know, who's counting? And he said, well, I knew it. You support our President Trump. And you're very smart when you're supporting Trump. I said, well, thank you very much. I'm glad you think Trump's doing a good job too. And then he got very energized and he said, Trump is the best. I like the way he talks about America. I came here legally. Why do they tell so many lies about Trump? The reporters tell many lies. And I said, yes, that's all true. You are a very astute observer of all these situations, my friend. Unfortunately, our conversation had to get cut a little short. He said, it was great talking to you. I said, great talking to you, my friend. And he said, I'm so excited. Tonight I will go home and I will tell my wife that I finally got to meet Tucker Carlson. I said, great to meet you too, buddy. Come by my Fox News studio anytime, personal tour. I'm there for you. I've got you covered. Now, that really doesn't tell you anything about anything other than I thought it was one way to introduce myself to you, so that at least tonight you might say, well, the guy that kind of looks like Tucker, he was okay. Who has better hair? I'll leave that up to you. But tonight, I promise I'll try to remember the very wise words of my headmaster at the Catholic school I went to in New York City. And, you know, we're out here in California, so I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. He used to say that whenever you're giving a speech, a toast, anything, treat it like a bikini. Enough to cover the subject, but short enough to keep it interesting. And I said, I will give that a go, to be sure. Now, to the business at hand. I know that this is an audience in particular that's really connected to what's going on in the country. You care, you're informed, you're obviously mobilized. You're trying to raise important issues of what's going on politically here in California and for the rest of the country. And I do come to you as a self-described bona fide swamp creature right now, because I am in fact a Washington, D.C. based political analyst and pundit. I work 5 minutes from the White House. I live about 5 minutes from the White House, 10 minutes or so from Capitol Hill. So I'm covering this stuff all day, all the time. I actually got a chance to interview the president a couple of weeks ago for 45 minutes. I will tell you that it was a Trumpathon, and it was amazing. The best stuff is the off-the-record stuff with Trump, as I'm sure you could all guess, but it is off the record. So once we're done here and I can actually have a few drinks, maybe then ask me and I'll tell you what the Donald says when the mic is off. But I did get a chance to talk to him, and I also get a chance to speak to senators and their staffs. You know, I see them during the day for interviews. I generally try to talk to the staff when I can during the week. And so I come to DC and I come to this conversation we have here with something of a, I'd like to think, insider's access, but an outsider's perspective. And with all of that, I can tell you, and we're going to take a bit of a turn here, that right now is the most important, but also most troubling and toxic week I've seen in national politics, certainly since Trump's election, and in many ways before that. Within the next 48 hours, we will know the outcome of one of the most momentous political battles, certainly of my lifetime. The fight over the Kavanaugh nomination, I think you can all expect it will be a struggle to the very last minute. Last I checked, the cloture vote will be tomorrow, and they're hoping to now do the final vote on Sunday, because one of the Republican senators has his daughter's wedding on Saturday. So the fate of the republic hangs in the balance, but there are weddings to attend. So this is going to be a very close-fought battle, I can tell you that. This is going to come down to a handful of votes, and I'm getting texts and emails from friends of mine who are either also journalists, other people that are on staff in DC, and everyone thinks that they know what the final count will be. I can tell you right now, nobody knows what the final count is going to be, because no one knows what's going to happen between now and when those senators actually take the floor, or if they even make the decision to take the floor. But I think the background of that fight, which is obviously going to play a huge role in the midterms, the background of what we've seen going on informs a lot of the other political conversations that you're having and that we all should be having. And I'm sure, I mean, you are Freedom Frontline, you are here in California, you're coming up against a lot of the Progressive Project and all of its shortcomings and all of its lunacy and all of its crazy. I was in LA recently, I've seen the tent cities, I know what's going on, it's getting out of control. There actually are some of those, you're seeing small bits here and there of these tents and vagrancy, permanent vagrancy that's apparently a choice of lifestyle now for some folks that's going on in DC as well. But I'll say this about the Kavanaugh struggle, and it's amazing to get a chance to speak to you all when I think the nation is more fixed on politics now than at any time I can think of since the presidential election of 2016. I've never seen an uglier fight in my career. I think it's safe to say that the partisan political debate is as nasty as it gets, which is pretty incredible considering that Donald Trump is president. Bernie Sanders thinks that socialism will save America, and I'm telling you right now that the craziest thing to happen in DC all year is this fight over the Kavanaugh nomination. I was expecting it to involve people being underhanded. I was expecting it to get nasty, but it's gone well beyond my expectations. What should have been the straightforward Senate confirmation of an eminently qualified DC Circuit Court judge, Brett Kavanaugh, instead turned into an all-out fight. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that the country will be a different place depending on what happens in the next 48 hours. Usually people come, they give speeches about politics, they want to talk about a horizon of the next election, which we'll do a little bit of today, but what's going to happen in the next 2 years, the next 10 years, what's going to happen for your children. I'm telling you that what happens in the next 48 hours is going to matter to you and your children. And that's no exaggeration. It's the very foundation upon which this republic was built, the rule of law, has been under assault. The processes that we have in place for determining guilt or innocence and the principles that undergird our system, they are being destroyed by the left in this bare-knuckled political power grab. Not an overstatement to say that liberals have undermined and abandoned the foundational concepts that protect us all from the state and from each other. I'm sure many of you watched at least part of the Senate hearing last week. Tens of millions of Americans did. It was a ritualized torture and denigration session, televised to the glee of the delusional, frenzied, politicized left. The motivations behind such dishonorable Democrat hacks as Senators Feinstein, I'm sure you're all quite familiar with. The boo on cue, thank you, I needed that. Leahy, Booker, it could not be more obvious and it could not be more disgraceful. Don't be fooled for one instant, my friends. This is all about power. There is no principle at stake here for the left. This is a stop-at-nothing attempt by them to maintain one of the key institutions of the progressive transformation of America, a left-leaning Supreme Court majority, one that they can count on to uphold previously unconstitutional power grabs and hand them, over time, slowly but surely, more progressive edicts dressed up as constitutional jurisprudence. This is the law because I want it to be. I'm here to warn you, to the best of my ability, that the leftists are radicalized, although you're in California, so you could probably tell me something about that. We're no longer dealing with the party of unions, fair wages, and civil rights, if we ever were. The Democrat Party of today is the party of Antifa, deplatforming, and trigger warnings. It's the party of socialism, collective guilt and identity politics, radical feminism, intersectionality, and 37 genders, 35 of which do not exist. It is, as you can see, if you were to take a glance into social media videos that are being shared right now, the party of women shrieking at senators, trying to frighten them into changing their minds about a momentous political decision. They profess to care about the downtrodden, of course. We all know they only care about themselves. You have women marching around in these pink hats in the streets, as well as refusing to clear the halls of the Senate, getting arrested in the dozens, by the way, dozens of them arrested just today alone. And when it comes to Kavanaugh, yes, when it comes to Kavanaugh, the left doesn't care what the rules are. They don't care what they have to do. You know, they'll report on him, and the media has been complicit in this whole process in such a way that they're actually changing terms, something I'm constantly talking about on radio. Be careful the way that they will alter words. I'm sure you're all familiar with the nonsensical term of an undocumented immigrant. They have documents, just not the documents that they want. There's many others that go along with that as well. There's now witnesses when they're really just talking about rumors. A witness is not somebody who heard something from somebody else maybe 30 years ago. But if you look at all the news reports, when it comes to Kavanaugh, that's now a witness. They've changed that one. The media, of course, are cowardly partisans posing as honest brokers of the truth. The left, some of you may be familiar with this, they call themselves woke. And in a sense, that is true, because there is a bestial nature to the outrage that they are showing now, this outrage theater that we are subjected to on an increasing, ever more frequent basis. They are like a great angry creature that has been disturbed. Emphasis on the disturbed. They've always been emotional, but now they're actually going into all-out hysterics. It's not enough to shout at us on social media. Now they mob us at restaurants and chase us into the streets. I'm quite aware of this because it happens in my town of D.C. They are not looking for converts. They are hunting for heretics. And Brett Kavanaugh is just one such heretic. They deride him with cheap, petty, sophomoric digs. Keg Party Kavanaugh, they call him, a drunk and angry white male. To them, he is the embodiment of white privilege. Do you know that he belonged to a country club? Horrifying. Did you realize that his father was a lobbyist and his mother was a judge? I bet he went to school wearing a top hat and a monocle, spitting on poor people all along the way. You see, he's earned nothing in their eyes. Their opposition to Kavanaugh is based in part on his jurisprudence. It's also based on the fact that they hate him and they love power. They hate everything that he stands for. They've worked themselves up into a frothy rage over this because Kavanaugh has never checked his privilege. He's just led a life of service and decency and excellence. As I like to say, I guess Kavanaugh's been mansplaining his whole life. They don't need any evidence, you see, because he played football. He belonged to an elite fraternity. And to the rage-filled left, his entitlement is the only evidence they need that he must be destroyed. Now, this sordid spectacle that I'm sure many of you have seen, you've been treated to if you've turned on the news, this is hard to parody at this point. Millions of Americans last week were shown how a number of senators, desperate to get that one viral clip, you know, the one that'll go on cable news, United States senators were yelling about bloofing in the Senate chamber. In response, under oath, a sitting D.C. Circuit Court judge who went to Yale undergrad and Yale Law had to say, yeah, it means flatulence. We were 16. So-called serious journalists, this is true, have been writing pieces with titles such as Why the FBI Needs to Investigate Bloofing. I used to work in some of those circles, and let me tell you, they've got their best men on it. The bloofing caper. The bloofing caper of 1982. It's not just the media, it's the Democrat politicians as well. They have lost their minds. I mean, the seriousness with which Senator Cory, I am Spartacus Booker. He's not Spartacus. The seriousness with which he said that, and then also picked apart a high school yearbook circa 1982 was a sight to behold. What does FFF mean? The senators intoned. What is the devil's triangle? They asked. Turns out it's a drinking game, which is odd because I thought the devil's triangle was what you called Bill Clinton and two interns left in the same room. I'm just saying. We watched as the Senate was turned into a beer tribunal. Did you enjoy beer? Did you drink underage? About half of America was answering for him, yes. He likes beer. So do I. All of a sudden, Senators Feinstein and Booker were the American Taliban. No alcohol, no partying, no mansplaining. I suppose we should be thankful they didn't want to give Kavanaugh 50 lashes on TV, but to be sure, the effects are far more than just Brett Kavanaugh here. And the collateral damage doesn't matter to the left at all. In fact, like all true tyrants, the higher the body count, the stronger the message. If you want to send a warning to your political enemies, you merely destroy those who actively oppose you. But if you want your political enemies to cower in fear, or even worse, to abandon all their principles, maybe even to join you out of self-preservation, you don't just destroy those who stand up and oppose you, you destroy all those around them too. Wow. Their families, their friends. Social media makes this all too easy these days. You don't just burn down one house, you burn down the whole village. The message is much more potent. With Kavanaugh, the left has gone politically thermonuclear. It's not just him they're going to take out if they can. They're also ruining the lives of his wife and children. Ashley Kavanaugh is the target of death threats. So are her young children. Do you think this is going to stop, by the way, if her husband is confirmed? Do you think it will stop even if her husband's nomination is defeated? Every friend and colleague of Kavanaugh's who comes forward risks the same fate. Anyone, myself included, you too, in this audience, by the way, anyone who speaks too loudly in public in defense of honor, decency, and rule of law can be a target. This is not the usual partisanship. Make no mistake, this is different. The climate is worse and worsening. It is more vicious now. It is out in the open. It is different, I am telling you. Leftists declare that their zealots should physically follow conservatives, harass them in the streets, get up into their faces. They want Kavanaugh, Republican senators, and anyone with the temerity to speak out, not just to be silent, but to feel a constant unease and anxiety for their beliefs. A spate of recent news stories tells you the tale. There's a high-end restaurant in D.C., fantastic food, a place called Fiola. Just last week, an angry mob formed around Senator Ted Cruz for the crime of trying to have dinner with his wife. The restaurant, true to its calling in hospitality, invited the senator and his wife back to finish their meal in place, almost like maybe the story would have a happy ending. Do you know what's happened since then in our nation's capital? Fiola has been under the most vicious campaign of threats imaginable. They've had to hire constant security now. They have security guards watching over people as they eat dinner. The owner has received death threats, including against his wife and children. Now, I feel the same way. Fiola has been under the most vicious threats imaginable. There's a tendency to say, though, that this is just a heated moment, that both sides are at fault and that this will pass. I'm sorry, but that's just not true. Chasing anyone associated with the White House or the GOP out of restaurants is not an isolated incident. The White House press secretary, Sarah Sanders, was told by the owner of a Virginia restaurant called the Red Hen that she wasn't welcome. Rude, but within her rights to do so. But then the owner chased her out of the restaurant to continue yelling at her because she decided to serve in this White House for this president. I wanted to share with you something that actually just came to my attention today before I was able to join you here. Senator Rand Paul's wife, Kelly Paul, published the following in an op-ed. It's 9 o'clock at night, and as I watch out the window, a sheriff's car slowly drives past my home. I'm grateful that they have offered to do extra patrols, as someone just posted our home address and Rand's cell phone number on the internet. All part of a broader effort to intimidate and threaten Republican members of Congress and their families. I now keep a loaded gun by my bed. Our security systems have had to be expanded. I've never felt this way in my life. In the last 18 months, our family has experienced violence and threats at a horrifying level. I'll never forget the morning of the shooting at the congressional baseball practice, the pure relief and gratitude that flooded me when I realized that Rand was okay. But he was not okay last November when a violent and unstable man attacked him from behind while he was working in our yard, breaking 6 ribs and leaving him with lung damage and multiple bouts of pneumonia. Kentucky's Secretary of State, lest you think that this is just one madman and that this isn't representative of the broader political culture and its descent into madness and anarchy, you had a prominent member of the state government of Kentucky, Kentucky's Secretary of State, Allison Lundergan Grimes, recently joked about it in a speech. MSNBC commentator Casey Hunt laughingly said on air that the assault of Rand Paul was one of her favorite stories. Cher, Bette Midler, and others have claimed that his attack on Twitter was a great thing. I hope these women never have to watch someone they love struggle to move or even breathe for months on end. My friends, we are living in a period of mass delusion. Trump has psychologically broken the political left, and they are lashing out. They are flash mobbing political appointees, menacing them in public, and humiliating them in front of their spouses. This is now an endorsed tactic. Cory Booker himself has said, get up in their faces. This is in the town that I now call home. There is a constant tension in the air. It is ominous. This should never be normal, but it has become the new status quo. And make no mistake about it, they are as committed as they are delusional. These progressives refer to themselves as the resistance, explicitly to associate themselves with the French anti-Nazi resistance of World War II. They call themselves Antifa for anti-fascist and speak of the need to oppose Nazis, which they often loosely define as anyone too closely associated with Trump or the GOP. They will celebrate what they call Nazi punching, but then they will attack well-known conservative scholars like AEI author Charles Murray. He was attacked at Middlebury College. This is supposedly at an elite liberal arts school with a price tag of $50,000 a year. Maybe they should study something other than grievances and victimology. This kind of inane rhetoric, though, can have very serious consequences. These actions can snowball and they can get worse. I need not remind you that a little over a year ago, a few miles from where I live in D.C., a left-wing zealot, one whose politics would be right in line with your average MSNBC watcher, he attempted a mass assassination of conservative members of Congress, specifically targeting the Freedom Caucus. Here I am speaking to a room full of highly educated, successful, worldly, motivated, politically in-the-know people. And how many of you can, without resorting to Google, name the man who almost took Congressman Steve Scalise's life with a bullet that shattered his pelvis and almost led him to bleed out within miles of the Capitol where he was serving his country? How many of you can name the man who was seconds away from eliminating Senator Rand Paul were it not for a couple of brave D.C. police intervening in just the right moment? I'm guessing very few, and that's no one's fault in this room. The name is James Hodgkinson. That's the shooter's name, but the media covered it in very sterile fashion, you'll notice, and they quickly moved on. That's the point. That's the purpose. Don't let people realize how bad it's getting. Don't remind them of what almost happened in this country just about a year ago. CNN's 10-person panels don't bring that up. The darkest day for political violence in this country in at least a decade. No mention of it from Tapper and Cooper, Maddow and Hayes, the rest of the sanctimonious libs. They're still preaching about the need for Trump to show more respect. You know, you certainly know Kavanaugh's name, and Mark Judge, and a whole bunch of others. All this has been manufactured by the left, looking at these people as some kind of hobgoblin of the right. These are men who have been the targets of the worst kind of smears and machinations, the kind of dirty tricks that might even give Soros himself a moment of pause. But this is really, maybe not. Maybe not. This is really serious, though. The contagion of this is everywhere, and it is worse than it has ever been. And we will see if they have been successful, as I said, in the next 2 days. If you think this doesn't affect you, by the way, let me tell you why it most certainly does. First of all, if they can do what they've done in recent weeks to Kavanaugh, they can do it to any person in this room. Any person you work with or for, any person that you respect and love, anyone that you hold up as a model for the way one should serve our country. They can do it to you. They can do it to absolutely anyone. If unsubstantiated allegations are now sufficient to destroy someone's life, this will become the first choice tool for the most malignant actors in our politics. The presumption of innocence and due process are core values of this country that separate us from many others around the world. They exist to prevent precisely what is happening now. The weaponization of rumors and the Stalinist tactics of character assassination based on innuendo and a prove your innocence standard. All of us can be targets. You may not think of yourself as a public person, but it doesn't matter. They can make you into one. You may not be politically active. You may not have all that much in terms of beliefs of a political nature. You can still be a target. With the internet and social media, all it takes is one statement, accusation, or misstep, and you will find yourself on the front page of websites with millions of readers. if you try to live your principles in your work as a conservative or merely stand up for justice and fairness, you may well find yourself crossing swords with the left. Ultimately, this is all about fundamental fairness and decency in our society. That is what is under attack right now. If Kavanaugh's nomination is defeated this Saturday, or if the vote is stalled yet again, it will be a huge victory for the worst political impulses in our country. As you know, the election coming up in November, I know it's why we're gathered here tonight, people are saying it's going to give control of the House of Representatives back to the Democrats, but I'm not giving up in that fight. The Senate is a toss-up. Some are saying we're likely maybe to keep a few seats, giving a slight advantage to the Republicans, according to most of the pollsters. If Kavanaugh is blocked, though, I think you will see a red wave. I've never seen conservatives so angry. In fact, they're so angry that I think even if Kavanaugh gets through, you may see a red wave. It's been very notable that even never-Trumpers, people on the right who have utterly refused to understand why Trump is so valuable at this moment in our national politics, they've come around on this issue and realized it's a good thing that we have a pit bull to fight off this pack of jackals. Because we are indeed in a political street fight, and Trump is a brawler. One of the main criticisms against Trump from Democrats, that he is too coarse and vulgar and unpresidential, well, that's at least been nullified for a while for anyone who's paying attention. Because Kavanaugh is the most establishment GOP figure you could ever imagine. Just as Romney, if you recall, was turned into a mean man who tortures dogs on the roofs of cars, keeps women inside binders, and gives old people cancer after he takes their jobs away, they've managed a similar and even much worse destruction campaign against Kavanaugh. We have seen how the left operates. Do not give them Boy Scouts, send them warriors, or we are all in trouble. This is political. This is, right now, as I'm speaking to you, playing out before us. It is political total war, scorched earth. For the left, anything for power, anything to win. Brett Kavanaugh could be you. He could be any husband, father, son, or friend in your life. We cannot allow him to be destroyed based on unproven, uncorroborated, and now ludicrous allegations. It is no exaggeration to say the soul of this country will be tarnished if this political hit on Kavanaugh is successful. I wish I could tell you otherwise, but I do think it is about to get much nastier. Batten down the hatches, hold fast to your principles, and prepare for it. We will get through the next couple of days and everything that comes after. As conservatives, we understand that we have God on our side and country alongside us. And I'm something of an optimist. I believe eventually the good guys here will win. But this vote will come down to the wire. And whether Kavanaugh is voted up or down, we are entering a midterm battle that will be as vicious as it is momentous. Election Day 2018 is the single best opportunity we have to slap down these mad statists and send a stinging rebuke to those who would pervert our politics in order to allow sanctimonious libs back into power to ruin places like California. We can stop them, and we must stop them. It's up to the Republicans in the Senate to confirm Kavanaugh. It's up to all the rest of us to keep the GOP majorities in the House and Senate. And above all else, to help keep America great. Thank you all so much.
How about that, ladies and gentlemen, huh?
Thank you all so much.
Great stuff. Can I get a microphone on over here? Hello? Hello, hello? Okay, thank you. Oh, we got questions. Hello.
I do radio. I can project.
Okay, well, yeah, but you got a nice mic right here. How about a big round of applause once again, Buck Sexton? Come on. Okay, so we got some questions pouring in. Can I ask you this question based on your presentation just now? You are an expert in dealing with these radical groups. You've studied and collected intelligence on radical groups and things like that. You've seen the war that we're in protracted since 2001. In that case, we're supposed to win the war, defeat the enemy, and de-radicalize them. Can we de-radicalize this progressive movement? And how would we go about doing it?
That's great. Give me the 2 words. That's an answer. What?
What?
Oh, 2-word answer. Oh, I thought she had the.
I thought you had a
So
two-word
how do we
answer for me.
de-radicalize?
I was excited. No, it's a really good question. I came out of the CIA after working specifically against Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the Taliban, these other extremist organizations that are incredibly violent. And then the first opportunity that I had to do field work as a journalist, I guess, would be the Occupy Wall Street movement, which was a very eye-opening experience. Not that they were violent or anything like Al-Qaeda, but there was an extremism in the ideology. There's certainly a radicalization that's occurred on the hard left. You see this with groups like Antifa. I mentioned them, anti-fascists. They run around here and punch people at different rallies and things. Look, this is where I start to feel like it's necessary to repeat what Andrew Breitbart said years ago about how politics is downstream from culture. We can make the best arguments possible. We can try to convince people as much as we can. But what I'm seeing are people being propagandized to in a way that by the time they finish college, you have a massive amount of, dare I say, re-education to do. That's probably the wrong term, but you have a lot of work to do to get them to actually understand why they shouldn't just accept what they accept as being the truth. I give speeches to all kinds of folks. I spoke to some college kids recently in D.C., a whole like this, but everybody was 18 to 22. And one of them stood up and said, "What do I do when somebody, because this has happened to him, what do I do when somebody says, well, you're wrong because you're a Nazi?" I said, "Don't engage. Don't engage. You're not. It's not worth your time when someone's that far gone. Focus on people that actually want to have a serious conversation, and then focus on living your conservative principles and spreading your message. Because once somebody's that far gone, so I don't have an answer. If I did, they should make me the king of everything. But it's a good question.
Okay, well, in that same vein, in that same spirit, what you just spoke about with being called a Nazi, we get this question. I work for a Silicon Valley company. I bite my tongue till it bleeds. Advice?
I'm also a pragmatist with these things. I think I tell the college kids, for example, when they ask, because this always comes up. I found the one conservative at my college a long time ago, and he was my thesis advisor. But there was one. There were more Marxists on the faculty when I was there, open Marxists. I'm not pejoratively Marxist, although there's that too. Open Marxists than there were open Republicans, which was quite a state of affairs, you can imagine. The way I tell them is, what I tell them is, don't be a martyr. Don't get a D- because you think you're going to stand up for the founding of the Constitution. Get a great job. Work with people that you know and can get the message out there and influence the world in a way that matters. Don't take a hit. And I say the same thing about people at a company. Don't if you're in a position to influence a conversation, great. But I don't want anyone getting fired because they're a conservative, because they will do that. They will do that.
To make a point, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, here's one for you. Are Republicans mad enough? What is the best platform to reach the most voters? And then there's a personal message on here I have to read to you. Will you join me October 27th in D.C. at the Walk Away March? Katie.
Sounds like fun. Yeah. Why not?
So are the Republicans mad enough? Are they mad enough, and what's the best platform to reach?
I can tell you just some anecdotes from what's gone on with this Kavanaugh battle, because it is, as I was saying in the speech just now, different from anything else I've ever seen before. People were calling me pretty cynical and hard-nosed, but right-of-center journalists were calling me saying that they were in tears during Kavanaugh's confirmation process. People were choked up about it, and also those who, out of, I think, a sense of maybe some professional allegiance, give the mainstream media the benefit of the doubt, they said, not anymore. This is too much. This is egregious. They have debased themselves in this effort to take down Kavanaugh. There is a rage among conservatives that is unifying, which is good, And when your principles are being, it's been fun. There've been some never Trumpers that I haven't had much contact with in the last year or so, and all of a sudden I'm like, hey, good to have you back. Glad we're fighting on the same team all of a sudden. So that part of it has been really good. We'll see. It's really tough to gauge how conservatives are going to react, how the base is going to react. If Kavanaugh does get confirmed, will they remember how atrocious this last month or so has been?
Great answer. All right. Have the Democrats overplayed their hand? Like, have they shot their biggest bullet, their biggest cannon? Have they overplayed it?
When you have the cable networks and sitting U.S. senators believing that a gang rape ring of teenagers could have existed in 1980s suburban, upper middle class Maryland, and nobody had any idea about this, no one said anything, when you have that level of either cynicism or stupidity or probably both, it's really hard to know how they could get any lower than that. So I do think the Democrats played their hand, but I didn't get as much into the Supreme Court as where it is in the mind of the left right now, but they view this as more important to them even than having control of the legislature from this next midterm election. They view this, if the left could choose a majority in the House this fall or this Supreme Court seat, they will take that Supreme Court seat. No question. No question. Some would say that short of a presidential election, this is the second, the most important thing for them. And you see what could change in the way that our laws are currently enforced and the way that they're interpreted based on this one seat. So they've gone all in.
Okay. Have we hit peak Avenatti? Will it get freakier? Will it get weirder?
I will say that Avenatti is a fascinating creature of this whole anti-Trump phenomenon that's going on right now. He actually was I didn't get to interview him. I had to do something else, but we interviewed him, or my colleagues interviewed him when his first allegations came out. And what you see is people who take themselves incredibly seriously and are generally very overpaid on some of these cable networks like CNN, and they'll put Avenatti on TV as though that there's credibility and decency, and people even talk about him running in 2020, which, if that's the best the Democrats can do, I think we're in pretty good shape. Although honestly, if it's between, you start to play this game and you go, oh my gosh. Spartacus Booker, yeah, I don't think he's gonna run either.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, you ready for another one?
Yeah.
Is Lindsey Graham back in the circle of trust?
My reaction to Lindsey Graham, I can tell a lot of you are like, yeah, Lindsey, because Lindsey, I've had some problems with Lindsey in recent years. Lindsey upsets me a little bit sometimes. He won me over forever because let me tell you, I was really, I actually tweeted this out after. I said, I want to move to Lindsey State now just so I can vote for him. That was how much I think, and this is very important. It was going against Kavanaugh that day. You have to remember that right now we think, oh, he's withstood. Kavanaugh has withstood allegations, completely uncorroborated, no evidence, of gang rape, attempted rape, kidnapping, drugging girls so he could rape them, and a lot of underage drinking. I mean, he's withstood all of that. They thought they had him in that hearing when Ford came out. And by the way, now you're seeing more of all the games with the lawyers, and you could drive trucks through the holes in her story. You could from the beginning. They thought they had him. They were this close. They were this close to the White House saying, we can't keep this going. I was hearing that from people in close contact with the White House, that it was this close after her testimony that day. And then then Judge Ford Kavanaugh, thank you. Kavanaugh came out swinging, and Lindsey Graham was like the cavalry coming over the hill. So I was very, very pleased with Lindsey that day, man. He's still, by the way, he's walking around, he's like, who wants a piece? They came up to him today. You know, I will say this is a real moment. If you haven't seen it, I thought about trying to do some videos, but it was going to be a little hard. There's some that I wish I could have shared with you. So, you know, Flake got cornered in the elevator last week, and he's like, he doesn't know what to do. Flake gets cornered in the elevator, and all of a sudden now, does the Supreme Court matter, rule of law? I don't want to be mean. And they tried the same thing with Orrin Hatch today, cursing and everything else. And Orrin Hatch was like, grow up, get out of here. He was having none of it. And I'm just like, I'm glad. And Lindsay, too, by the way. Lindsay was saying that they should, somebody said, Kavanaugh should take a polygraph. And Lindsay was like, yeah, why don't we see if we push him underwater if he floats? This is crazy. Yeah, you know. You know. I'm like, I like this. Lindsay, all of a sudden, you know, he's getting in there. He's doing some pretty good stuff. So we've seen some people really step up and understand how important this is, and we've seen some others who have been obviously pretty disappointing.
Are you a football fan?
I mean, vaguely.
You follow it?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
If Mitch McConnell gets Brett Kavanaugh onto the Supreme Court, is he an elite political quarterback destined for the Hall of Fame for what he's done?
I think yes. I think, look, I know there's a lot of people, and some of them are friends of mine, a lot of people on talk radio that give Mitch a really hard time. He's very establishment, everything else. That he held the line and we did not have Merrick Garland in, which was completely within his right and within, you know, notice when the left doesn't like something, they ruin someone's life and try to have them thrown in prison. When we don't approve, we're like, well, the rules say that this is how we do it. You know, we actually try not to act like a bunch of savages. So, you know, that's a very important difference. And McConnell, if this happens,
yeah.
And by the way, I'm telling you, it's going to be, I don't know. And I'm talking to people all the time they're in the halls of the Senate right now as they're pulling out the women with the pink hats and the whole thing. They don't know. They're talking to staff. Flake is obviously a waffler. Murkowski is obviously of real concern here. I think Manchin, I think Manchin actually, if he's not the deciding vote, might go, but that won't really matter then. So we'll see. By the way, it would be the first, if it's a 50-50, it would be the first time in history ever that you might have a Supreme Court justice with a tie-breaking vote from the Veep. I mean, Pence, they should have him, you know, rappel through the ceiling. I mean, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing.
Could we? Do you think we could get him? Do you think we could get him to do one of these?
Oh yeah, Yeah.
Okay. In your opinion, why hasn't Paul Ryan been replaced in the last 30 days? I'm assuming that too many of the Republicans are still in the swamp.
I mean, I think your next Speaker of the House, God willing, will be Jim Jordan. Who's I can tell you, a great member of Congress and also a really good guy, which is nice. Why haven't they gotten rid of Ryan? I think that they got enough on their plate right now to think of, and quite honestly, nobody wants to disrupt this unity where they realize, wait, you're a conservative, you care about rule of law, okay, maybe you don't like Trump's tweets. You realize they're trying to steal the balance of the Supreme Court to their side by completely destroying somebody and setting a precedent that would be the ugliest thing we've seen in decades, right? If you're okay with that, you are not a conservative. So we want to keep that big hug among the right going.
All right, let's hit you with a couple of more open questions that are beyond just the politics of the day. This question is, what do you read or watch regularly? Is there something that's destination for you?
So my schedule is a point of some curiosity for other people in media in D.C. I do a show on thehill.com every morning with a progressive co-host, by the way, which requires things. No, she's great, but obviously she had her own show at MSNBC. She's very progressive. I do that, and so I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning. The radio show is 6 to 9 p.m. at night, and then I do Fox when I can, either after or before. So it's a pretty long day. In terms of what I read in the news cycle, I mean, pretty much everything. The two books that I tend to recommend when I get a chance to speak to a fine group of patriotic Americans and conservatives like this. They're not fun. We could talk fun books. Like we could be like, hey, who likes the latest Brad Thor? If you want, I'm going to drink, and you can talk to me about that later. Only one clap for Brad Thor.
Yeah, just one, huh?
I thought, yeah, I forgot. He didn't, all right. I'm gonna have to call Brad. No, but the two books that I always recommend, if you haven't read them, I think that they're kind of necessary background for conservatism would be Hayek, The Road to Serfdom, which I'm sure you've all, yeah, I know. Yeah, Hayek. And then Bastiat's The Law, which is short and very readable. But those of you that don't like the state of California taking your stuff and giving it to other people, read Bastiat. You'll be like, ooh, this guy gets it. He really understands.
Great recommendation.
Yeah.
What is your assessment of North Korean Rocket Man?
So I used, well, it's interesting about the appearance. So I'm actually, by trade, a national security guy, first and foremost. So I do a lot of politics, too, but that was what I did for years, the CIA. And what you don't hear from people, first of all, most of the people you see going on TV to talk about North Korea know nothing. So just be aware that they're all basically saying the same. There's some who are knowledgeable, but generally speaking, the people talking about what's going on in the Korean Peninsula are not people you want to listen to. You want to do your own research and reading. The reason that Kim Jong-un looks the way he does is explicitly so that he can resemble his father, Kim Il-sung. It is a visual representation of the continuation of that state, which I believe you could say is actually a necrocracy, because it's effectively still ruled by the dead grandpa. He is technically still the head of the, I don't know, I think he's not the chairman of the party, but he might be still the chairman of the party. So the country's technically ruled by a dead guy, but they do have those associations. The way that he dresses, his haircut, all of this is meant to evoke his grandfather, the founder of the North Korean state, and a puppet of the Soviets. So this is what you asked me about Rocket Man.
The assessment, and I guess.
So here's the best national security analysis I can give you on Rocket Man that's worth saying over dinner. And by the way, do we want to do a few shout out questions?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
We'll do a few of those.
Absolutely.
I know also you guys want to have coffee and we want to get to the bar and everything. So, like I said, my bikini is getting bigger and bigger. I don't want to be that guy. It's turning into a burkini. Have you seen those? Someone said gross. Yeah. Anyway. He is going for questions. So with Trump and Kim Jong-un, some of you have probably seen the movie Tombstone, right?
Yep. Sure.
Trump dealing with the North Korean threat is kind of like having Doc Holliday with the shotgun. It really only works if you have a guy with the shotgun that you think might kind of use it, And Trump is that, like when Obama used to say, all options are on the table, nobody was really taking him at his word that all options were on the table. With Trump, you take him at his word that all options are on the table. And that's a very different thing, a very different place. So I think, in a sense, his unpredictability, sometimes he says things, I'm not really sure what the president's going out there, but his unpredictability on that matter specifically is necessary to break what is a tremendous amount of, it's not even inertia, because the situation actually kept getting worse. The status quo in North Korea was unacceptable. But the missile tests have stopped, and there is hope of what would be, and by the way, the liberals will hate this, the greatest national security and diplomatic breakthrough of the post-Cold War era would be if Donald Trump is right on North Korea. I don't know if he will be or not, but that will drive libs insane. Because it's one thing for him to be good on the economy, because he actually is a capitalist, but for him to understand statecraft and international relations, that's just too much.
All right, who wants to jump in with a question? Anybody want to jump in with a question?
Anyone?
Over here, okay. Hold on.
Please psychoanalyze Flake. I don't understand.
Oh, I can do that for you easily, and I'm not licensed to practice in any state. No. So Jeff Flake isn't running again, and I can tell you that the world of I do things that the left likes when you leave the Senate is a whole lot more lucrative and favorable than the world of I stood firm for conservative principles, and that's you see this with some guys who all of a sudden get a lot more moderate right before they run over to get a CNN contract, and they get put on the board of some company that they have no expertise to actually add to. It's a much better world to be in for your bottom line to have been doing some of the left's bidding on the way out. That's how I see it. That's how I see it.
All right, we got a question in the back from Chuck.
Yeah, we've had 7 now FBI investigations into Judge Kavanaugh. Are we going to get 1 investigation into Chaistein? And also, we've got 18 potential Senate seats to pick up. in this midterm. We need to get out and everyone register, everyone.
Absolutely.
Including the hospital beds, the mental wards, and make sure the illegals, dead, and the mentally challenged are not going to vote.
So, we covered a lot of ground there.
Yeah, you might want to drill down into Shystein.
But let's Shystein or whatever. So on the FBI investigations, it's been fun because I've created a public, both on radio and also I wrote the first article I wrote the day after, if I recall, the Ford allegations came out at thehill.com was don't fall for this obvious political hit. It was clear as day could be to me, and at every day since then I've said, you know what's going to happen the next day or two? This thing. Another allegation. They're going to complain about the FBI investigation. It has all been so very predictable, dishonorable but predictable, and that tells you a lot about where this all comes from. The FBI investigations, it's not even proper to call them an investigation because they have no criminal investigatory authority. They're not covered under the statutes, or the FBI doesn't deal with the statutes that are at play here. It's not a criminal investigation. It's a background investigation. If I walk up to you and I say, hi, I'm with the FBI, which I'm not, but I would like to know about so-and-so, we're doing an investigation, you can say, I want to talk to you. And you know what the end of that conversation is? That's it. If I go up to you and I say, I think that there might be, somebody who's involved in drug dealing, and maybe now I can pull your phone records, I can pull your text messages, there's a whole lot of stuff that I can do if I have probable cause. None of that applies here. So now they're complaining about the FBI investigation because it was never going to be what they were pretending they thought it was, if that makes sense. It's just absolutely not the tools that they need. And then on Feinstein, yeah, that's great. Senate Intelligence Committee, not intelligent enough to figure out she's got a Chinese spy for 20 years. Seems, it's true. It sounded like, what am I missing? I thought we're in the fact zone. Yes, go
All right,
ahead.
straight in the back.
Hi, we have spent enough time and money on the Mueller investigation. I want to know what you know about it. We want to see it end.
Yeah. So and Barbara, give me get the hook, because I'll stay and hang out as long as you guys all want. And by the way, I will be by the bar, and we can talk about whatever you want later. Because Russia is something I've been talking about from the very, very beginning. I was very opposed to the appointment of a special counsel. I knew it was going to be the nightmare that it's turned into. A few key points that I could give you on this. And I will say my colleague at the Hill, John Solomon, who you also probably see a lot on Hannity's show. I work with John. He's been doing... John has been like a one-man army of truth on this issue. He's the one who's breaking these text messages with FBI agents saying, yeah, we're going to basically make Hillary win, right? And then we get all these news anchors, well, that doesn't mean they want to make her win. Maybe it means that, something else. They've completely lost their minds. Anybody who thinks that Carter Page, who I've spoken to extensively, was worth four FISA warrants over the course of a few months is either delusional or is just completely wildly dishonest. Carter Page was not a threat to anyone's national security. He was a pretext for that whole investigation. Same thing with Papadopoulos. This guy, and by the way, I have a little inside track because I can tell you guys this stuff. There's going to be some more text messages that are released in the next few weeks that show that they knew that Papadopoulos was no threat. They knew that I have that on good authority that it's going to come out that the FBI was aware, but they went with it anyway. Now, once to the FBI, we're talking about 6 or 7 people within the FBI. It's important to note. I worked for the CIA. People ask me, oh, did you know so-and-so? The CIA is huge, enormous, right? The FBI is enormous. So 5 or 6 people is not a lot in terms of the overall, but if they happen to be the head of the counterintelligence division, for example, that really matters.
All right, I got one back here.
Is there anything this group tonight can do in the next 48 hours to help Judge Kavanaugh be approved?
The tools that you are aware of, please use them. Call. I've been giving out the number on my radio show. So, I'm in most of the 50 states, and I'm able to say, please call, especially if you are in one of the states where, you have somebody who's a senator who's on the fence, so if you happen to be, which wouldn't really apply here. Whatever the opposite of being on the fence was, or being honest, Feinstein and the whole... You guys have some of the worst here, I'll be honest with you. Between Feinstein and Kamala Harris,
Yeah, you might get the prize for worst libs in elected office. I gotta say, I mean, New York is pretty terrible too. My hometown, you got Cuomo, but anyway, yes, please call. Which I know sounds like call, but no, it actually they pay attention. People may have stopped the Supreme Court nomination from going through from yelling at Jeff Flake. So you have, your ability to contact people, of course, in a civilized and respectful fashion, but your ability to contact people really does matter, and use social media. Conservatives don't use social media platforms enough. We think it's like, for the hippie tech kids or something, and unfortunately, or fortunately, it's an incredibly powerful platform. As we know.
We got one final one for you.
One more question. The FBI put out one piece of paper for all the senators to read, and it had to be read to them today. And so they had readers reading. Do you know why that was the case? They couldn't have just put out the report, and why they made it just to those senators? Do you know anything about that?
That might have been over the 7 hours that my flight kept getting pushed back from this morning. That was a thing that happened. No, it might be an issue of they just wanted it to be this staff. So here's the big. I can tell you what the big concern is: that there will be selective leaks from the report, right? So they're trying to create a process where that won't happen. Yes, the Democrats already. So in my mind, I want the FBI report released, which is going to show a whole lot of nothing burgers. I want the unredacted FISA information to come out on Carter Page. I spoke to President Trump about that specific issue, saying you have to do this. And he knows, but he's trying to, protect the equities of the different intelligence community agencies and partners and all that. But yeah, the FBI report, if it had anything in it, we'd already know about it. I mean, anything derogatory about Kavanaugh. Yeah. There was no way that it wasn't going to be exactly what we already know. If Ford had changed her statement, she already gave sworn testimony. And she also gave testimony that she told them everything that she knew. So if all of a sudden she's like, well, now I've really got all the witnesses, that's not how it works. So we'll have to see if it ends up being enough. It's going to be Sunday, apparently. Sunday we will find out. I kept saying 48 hours. I guess it's now 72.
All right, Buck, you've done a great job answering these questions. And he will